Welcome to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. Hi there. So with the rise of social media and the many taped Karen encounters, it would appear that Black people are constantly sounding the alarm about injustice they face on a daily basis. And while there is no question that racism and oppression do exist and can be blamed for holding Black people back, and for preventing them from creating generational wealth, do some Black people have a victim mentality? Do we play the victim? Now, I thought that role went exclusively to the Karens of the world. But hey, the business of being Black today is Black people playing the victim. Please welcome the editor of Shift magazine, Kevin Bourne. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Assistant professor at the University of Central Florida, Dr. Larry Walker is with us. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Larry.
Hey, Tammy, good to see you.
Television personality and criminal justice activist, Mona Lisa Johnson. Hey, Mona Lisa.
Hey, Tammy, how are you?
Oh, I'm just fine. Let's get this party started. So Black people playing the victim. Listen, if we are or are not playing the victim, why should Black people care? Why should we care if we play the victim or not? Mona Lisa, kick it off.
I think the reason why we should care is because after all these years of learning to be the victor and fighting through the middle passage, doing the things that we've had to do to come to today's times, now having meetings, now having marches, now having all different types of ways to get our voice out there, we need to care more now than we have ever cared in the past.
Kevin, what you got? Why should Black people care if we play the victim?
Because to be honest, I think it's actually holding us back a lot as a people. Like, I think that obviously, there are still, some ramifications of things that have happened to us, as people in the past. But I think it generally is holding us back. When you think about, economic empowerment of Black people, I think you cannot be economically empowered and be the victim at the same time. I think we have to kind of, receive the fact that, yes, some things have happened to us, but I think we kind of have to choose. Do we want to be an economically empowered people, or do we want to continue to kind of be the victim and kind of have our future be determined by other people outside of our community?
Dr. Larry Walker, why
should
Black people care?
So, Tammy, let's just talk about what's going on right now. Just yesterday at Howard University, several HBCUs received bomb threats. And almost a quarter of HBCUs received bomb threats for the last couple of weeks. It is not a matter of being a victim, it's a matter of challenging systems of oppression, right? So, and if you go back and look at schools like Howard University was founded in 1867, right after Reconstruction, and several hundred years later, students who were attending Howard University trying to get a quality education have, throughout the last few weeks, multiple times, Spelman College, Fisk, and other HBCUs have received bomb threats. And Tammy, I want to add one other thing. Just a few days ago, one of the news stations played one of those recordings of the bomb threat. And the person who called was very clear that they were calling in regards to calling an HBCU because they educate Black students. So this idea that Black people are playing in a victim in a system that continues, and I know Kevin mentioned economic empowerment. Well, we could talk about housing segregation, right? So those are issues that are out of the power of African Americans in terms of banking issues. You talk about gentrification, right? So we could talk about a variety of economic issues that relates to the Black community that's outside of our control.
So then, do I hear you saying, Dr. Walker, that we are the victim? We're not playing the victim. We are the victim, because let's face it, if we talk about your example, which is bomb threats at HBCUs, which has happened within the last few weeks, we can go, and then that phone call that you heard of the person or perpetrator specifically saying we are bombing HBCUs because they educate Black people. Isn't this a part of American history? Trying to prevent Black people from being educated? For crying out loud, we can take this all the way back to Harriet Tubman. She carried a Bible simply to ward off people from thinking who she was, because literally she couldn't read. And so she said, let me carry the Bible, because if I carry the Bible, they won't think it's me because they think I can't read. And that was obviously something that absolutely positively held Black people back, and it's still holding Black people back today, the power of education. So are we the victims? Is that what you're saying, Dr. Walker?
No, what I'm saying is, I mean, we don't have to use the word victim, right? We could also use the word for a survivor, right? Survivors, right? Because that's essentially what we are, right? So, and you talked about Harriet Tubman. I could talk about Frederick Douglass, right? And his experience, and eventually learn how to read, becoming a statesman. Now, the issue is, and I think one of the things I do in my research is I don't focus, I focus on systems, right? So the challenges that Black people encounter in our country is not just a matter of Black people. Certainly, like I said, when Kevin mentioned economic empowerment, issues like that, it's a matter of us giving the opportunity to continue to thrive, right? So thrive and live.
Well, Mona Lisa, you spoke to that. You said, the reason we should care about playing the victim is because we have always been the victors and that we have been survivors. So I want you to expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, it is no doubt that there's victimization occurring in our society. Every day there's things trying to hold us back and things that are trying to stop us from progressing as a people. But I believe personally, because I am a multicultural woman, my mother is Italian and my dad is Black. And I like to get the elephant out the room because a lot of people look at my skin color and they just automatically assume that's not a Black woman. But may I challenge, the viewers to think about the fact that Black is an experience. It's not just a color. So when I was being born and raised, my father was the one who pretty much raised me. So at the end of the day, I have had to go through multiple things in this life to overcome and understand what I'm dealing with as a Black woman. We have to realize that, yes, things are happening to us, but over the years, we have proven that we have survived and we've become not just a victim, but a victor over everything. I was actually taught to believe that just because there's something in front of us that's attempting to hold us back doesn't necessarily mean that we have to embrace that and allow that to be our truth. Yeah. Sometimes, yes, ma'am. Sometimes we have to realize that, when given the obstacle, it does not necessarily mean, like, for example, prison, people who go to prison, people who get charged to go to prison. My daughter was personally incarcerated, and she is a Black female and she looks clearly Black. And she was over sentenced just because she was a Black woman. First time. She was given 10 years for a crime that some other white women just prior to us going into her court sentencing were the same exact crime. 3 other white women were given rehab, mandatory rehab. Now, at the time, my daughter was a drug addict as well, but she was given 10 years mandatory minimum prison sentence.
Wow, that is crazy. Listen, victims are usually considered an underdog, or victim playing is the fabrication of victimhood for a variety of reasons. Maybe to manipulate others, maybe it's a coping strategy, or maybe it's just simply attention seeking. So Kevin, I'd like to ask you, what does it mean to play the victim when we talk about Black people?
I think, again, as I mentioned before, I think for a lot of us, I think we're looking for things to be fair. And I think a lot of times when you look at the Black community, we've been through so much trauma in the past. Like, the fair thing is for people to, to in a sense, to make things right. Whether you're looking at the government, you're looking at society in a whole. I think the idea is it's fair. It actually is fair for things like, for the government or it's just society to say, I'm sorry. And, and to make things right for us. For me, I think that's what I see from a lot of people in our community is that we're looking for, for the government, looking for people to make things right for us instead of saying, let's take matters into our own hands and see how within our community, how we can actually make things better for ourselves. Because the reality is that support may not come, those changes may not come. And I think the only way to have real sustainable change is that change has to first begin with us, and then it has to come from these other people. So for me personally, I think the victimhood comes in just kind of waiting for people to make things right instead of kind of making things right for ourselves, and also just embracing it. Like it all comes down to mentality. I think experientially, yes, we're experiencing victimhood, just like the Dr. Walker said, like certain things happening in the news, like we are genuinely experiencing things that have us in a place of kind of being on the receiving end of these things and feeling like we're the underdog. But just because these things are happening experientially doesn't mean we have to see ourselves as the victim. I think that for me is the issue. It's not the fact that these things aren't happening. It's the fact that in the midst of it, I think we can choose to see ourselves not as a victim and choose to kind of move forward.
But aren't Black people the underdog of America? Are we not?
Yes.
Yeah, we are. I mean, since we are, first Africans arrived here in 1619, right? We've consistently been the underdog, right? But I think it's important to note that, in talking to Black people, and even as a researcher, Black people don't see themselves as victims. What they see themselves is trying to survive a system, economic, political, social issues that's continued to undermine every step they've taken. An example, Tammi, over the last couple of months, is more than 12 states have passed voter suppression laws, right? Those laws are aimed at making sure, like in Georgia, elected Senator Warnock, first Black man since Reconstruction to be elected to the U.S. Senate. So those bills are purposely trying to make sure that things, that we don't have another, Senator Warnock over the next couple of years.
That we don't turn Georgia blue, right?
Yes. Stacey Abrams would like to hear about that. So would like to be involved in this conversation. So specifically designed to make sure that it doesn't happen. And so when we talk about democracy and equity, it has to be about fairness with people in the Black community, like I said, who've been here for several hundred years. And all we're looking for is the same treatment that everyone else has received. But
we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, I want to talk to Kevin, because Kevin says Colin Kaepernick played the victim. He used his Blackness to appeal to the people, to manipulate us. Ha, ha, ha. How so, Kevin? We'll talk about it when we return on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on FOXSOUL. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack, and today the business of being Black is Black people playing the victim. Please welcome the editor of Shift Magazine, Kevin Bourne, assistant professor at the University of Central Florida, Dr. Larry Walker, television personality and criminal justice activist, Mona Lisa Johnson is here. Kevin, you say Colin Kaepernick played the victim. How so?
Now, let me just say that, in the beginning, when he did take the knee, I thought that was actually good. I wasn't opposed to him taking the knee at all. And some of the things that he did. But I think just, over time, I just kind of looked and I was like, I don't think he's moving right when it comes to just his approach. And, specifically even, him trying to get a job in the NFL and having his combine and, wearing a Kunta Kinte t-shirt to his combine press conference. I was like, come on, are you really trying to get a job in the NFL? Or because I'm like, just looking at that approach, I'm like some of those small things. I'm like, okay, are you really trying to get a job on in the NFL? Or are you just trying to prove a point? So for me, just certain things like that. Like, I feel like, from some of the mentality I saw from him and some other people is that, well, you should just give him a job just like that. But I mean, if I'm looking from the vantage point of the NFL, I'm like, okay, is he good for culture and all that kind of stuff? How is he going to fit with my team? And so when you're, again, that example of you're having a combine, you're wearing a Kunta Kinte t-shirt, it's like, okay, I think if he had
First of all, Kevin, what's wrong with the Kunta Kinte t-shirt? I think that, again, that the whole point of that combine was for him to get a job. So I'm like, well, if you're trying to get a job, like anybody's trying to get a job, you put your best foot forward. If I'm trying to get hired by somebody, I gotta I gotta put my best foot forward. And so I just felt with. Also, in other words, you're saying if you're going in to get a job at Microsoft, you're not going to wear a Kunta Kinte t-shirt. You're going to dress appropriately.
I think you got to read the room. I think you got to read the room and see what's the culture here, what's the temperature here. And I think again, it's different if you were going into, I don't know, if you're applying for a job at McDonald's or something, then maybe, it doesn't matter. I don't think
they want you to wear a Kunta Kinte t-shirt to the interview either.
Yeah, but I think there's nothing wrong. Like I would actually wear the shirt myself. Like I think it's a cool shirt. I just think that again, if you're in a position where you're trying to get a job and you've been training for a job, it's like, well, that's not the best way. So I think in that particular instance, it just looked like, okay, you're not here to get a job. You're here to kind of use this platform as an opportunity to say something, maybe play the victim in this particular setting. And even just seeing the response from just the Black community in general, I was just kind of like, wow, it seemed like people were overwhelmingly in support of him, wearing the shirt and how he was going about things. And anytime someone was against it, like Stephen A. Smith was like, oh, you're a sellout, Stephen A. Smith. Oh, Jay-Z, you're a sellout, because they went about things differently. So I think not only did it show, I feel like a little bit of that victimhood in him, I just think it really showed the fact that people came out against the Stephen A. Smiths and the Jay-Z's. I think it showed just the state of what, the mindset of just our community.
Yeah, I do think that our community, the Black community, sometimes picks a side when the truth of the matter is there was a Malcolm X and there was a Martin Luther King. You know what I mean? There was the NAACP and there were the Black Panthers. So there is more than one way to get to the same destination. But there is a thin line between reading the room and being a sellout, isn't there, Mona Lisa?
Absolutely, but I don't think he was a sellout in any way, shape, or form. You know what I believe? I believe that, some of us got to go to the slaughter for some of us. Some of our lives have to be, turned upside down, and we have to be the chosen one used to put the message out there. I feel like a lot of us have judged him, for, how he brought about the message, how he took it forward, what he ended up doing in the media and how he played XYZ. But at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to get the message out, and he got it out. And so in my opinion, I don't feel like he acted like anything other than what he should have acted like. And I feel like a lot of his moves were right and a lot of his moves were wrong. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be the judge. I'm not going to be the judge because the world woke up and they smelled the coffee on that message. And that's what's important. Some of us just got to pay the price for others in order to be used to get that message out.
Let's face it, several Black people have paid the price for the way that we live today. I do want to say this about Colin Kaepernick, though, Dr. Walker. Before he garnered so much attention, I have to say that afro was not there. It was not there before he garnered the attention. So does Kevin have a point? Did he become progressively Blacker? Dr. Walker?
Tammi, I think this is there's a lot of layers to this conversation. First of all, I'm a big sports fan, so I'm all in on this conversation. So I think there's a couple things in terms of specifically the shirt, and let's talk about Kaepernick's hair. Kaepernick, like a lot of Black people, particularly from diverse backgrounds, because Black people are not monolithic, right? Many of us go through this enlightening period, right? That you spend all the time in elementary, middle school, and high school, not learning anything about your culture, who you are. And then at some point, maybe in high school, particularly in college, or when you're talking to friends, you start learning more about your culture. You're taking more pride, right? So we know historically, Black hair has always been criminalized, right? So let's start with that. This is important to note that. So had his afro continue to grow, it certainly maybe grew along with his consciousness and understanding who he is and his role as a Black man in America. I've gone through that experience. I didn't have an afro back in the day, but I went through that experience like many Black men in America. Also, let's talk about this Kunta Kinte t-shirt. First of all, the shirt is fly. That's first of all. Second of all, I know a lot of people that have worn that shirt, and I've worn similar shirts many times just walking around, right? So, but it's his right to wear that shirt. Kunta Kinte is part of our history and people in terms of Africans who were enslaved, right? So that's part of our history as a people of African descent in the United States. And let's talk about Kaepernick's skill set. Anybody who knows anything about football knows that, and excuse me with this phrase, but he's blackballed. Let's be serious. That's why when he sued the NFL, they settled out of court, right? Let's be clear. So also I want to add, there are currently 32 NFL teams. There are only 2 Black coaches. One was just hired. So let's be real about what Kaepernick was fighting for, and specifically we talked about the murders of African Americans at the hand of law enforcement. Black people more than 2 times more than any other group to be killed by law enforcement, based on a study that was conducted in 2020 by Harvard University. So let's be clear about what he was talking about, what the symbolism means, and what we need to do as a nation.
So Mona Lisa, you said that Blacks are not victims, but we are victimized because we're victims of racist circumstances in society.
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, the reality is that when you look at every bit of American society, about 80% of it is set up to work against us, certainly not to work for us. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which direction you look in, you're going to have some sort of a struggle, a fight, a challenge. And it's, the reason why I say that, we're not necessarily victims is because I still go back to in my mind where I look at the way we've come from the past to the future and how we're constantly standing on behalf and screaming out and saying what's wrong because we're bold enough to stand up and fight for ourselves, which in my opinion makes us a victor. Now, it doesn't stop the fact that we're being victimized, okay? Like I said about the incarceration scenario. When you look at the prison justice system, at the end of the day, there are more Black men and more Black women, incarcerated than in any country in the world. And so that's slowly changing because of people who are starting to speak and bring their voice to the forefront. They're not being ashamed anymore. That's what causes us to become that victor. When you open your mouth and speak, that's why I admire you so much, because you don't hold back. And you just say it like it is, and you're not afraid to just bring any subject to the forefront. We need people like you on the front line, because at the end of the day, if you're not there, then somebody probably won't be there.
Well, I certainly thank you for that. I appreciate you for that. Kevin, I do want to ask, are you suggesting, or do you suggest that we forget about the past and what's been done to us and not necessarily protest and fight in the ways that we do and just move on our regular lives and be victors? Is that the thing that's keeping us in a victim mentality, our past, the past of Black people?
I think it's obvious that, there's still trauma within our community because of things that have happened in our past. Like, those things haven't gone away, and there's still things happening today. For me, it comes down to from what mindset do you live? And I think that's the issue, is I think a lot of people live in that place day to day. It's like, again, you look at the, Jay-Z, when he took the deal with the NFL, and everyone was like coming down on him, and he was like, well, how long are we going to kneel? Like, how long are we going to do that? Like, we got to do something. We got to do something else. Like, there has to be a different way. And I think, I've seen that question asked even during, the protests following George Floyd. Like, they had that viral moment where those, three generations were kind of talking, 16 and 30 and 50. And they're like, the one in the middle, the 30-year-old, is like, there has to be a different way. Like, we've been out here since we were that kid's age, and we're still out here now. So there has to be a different way. And I think, because we're still protesting some of the same things we were protesting back in the 60s and onward, I think that's the question I have, is this the best way? Because I sometimes question, has it been effective? And I think there might be more effective ways.
Well, I think that I do believe that Colin Kaepernick's kneeling is a direct result of Jay-Z being a part of the NFL. So I don't think we should discount any of the roads and the journeys that Black people have taken to come this far. Let's come to a commercial break right now, and we'll be right back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on FOXSOUL. Welcome to the Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on FOXSOUL. I'm Tammi Mack, and the Business of Being Black today is Black people playing the victim. Ooh, this is a good one. So, Kevin, do Black people rely on white people or the system to rescue them? You kind of mentioned it a little bit, maybe we're leaning a little too much on, our government.
I do think there are people within our community that are looking for solutions to come from those kinds of people, whether it's society in general or not for profits or the government. And again, I think it's fair to actually want that, but I think for me, the issue I have is that's not empowerment to me. Like, waiting for somebody to kind of make your situation better isn't empowerment. I do think that, we need to find ways, again, within our own community to figure out how to fix those situations. And not to say that some of the other methods, aren't important, because again, wars are fought on many different fronts. But just me personally, I wonder whether it's effective to at least within, certain people I see within the community, to really just rely on the fact that, okay, we need reparations and we need those things, because the reality is they may not come. And I think waiting on those things to come is the opposite of empowerment.
Okay. I get you. I want to ask Dr. Walker on that. Listen, doesn't all of America rely on the government? For crying out loud, you just talked about the Voting Rights Act, Dr. Walker, and how these voter suppression laws are being put into place, which means to me that voting is one of the ways to hold the control and hold the power of America, to continue to be the person who outlines the rules and regulations of America. And so if Black people can't do that, even if we do whatever Kevin is suggesting we do in our own community and start with ourselves, is it possible to control the government in a way that would help us significantly? Did I just make sense or no?
Yeah, always, Tammi. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. So I think there are a couple things, right? So the voter suppression laws are about power, not democracy, right? So the government is supposed to be for the people, by the people, right? And I think this is a few other things that we should discuss as it relates to government. And I'm gonna give you a recent example, and then I'm gonna go back in the past because I love history stuff. So so recently during COVID-19, we had a number of stimulus bills, right, to get the economy going. One of them was supposed to provide money for small businesses. Well, a report came out a couple months after that disproportionately Black small businesses were not getting the support they need from the government, right? And then you go back historically, let's talk about World War II right after that. People, my grandfather couldn't get the GI Bill, right, to go to college or to buy a home, right? So historically, the government is, like I said, supposed to be for the people, by the people, but historically, Black people have not gotten.
It's interesting you bring up the small businesses because the same thing happened with the farmers. And Joe Biden, I believe, came back and said, you know what? We understand that Black farmers did not get a share of that stimulus. So we're going to now give Black farmers their share of the funds. And everybody got upset.
Yeah, you just hit on an issue. And I'm a former congressional staffer, and this issue is decades in the making, right? And so that point you made is important because now that's in litigation, because that money historically was, they allotted that money to make sure they take care of Black farmers who lost their farms and hadn't gotten the support they needed to buy seeds, et cetera. But that's now in litigation because they're being sued. Agriculture Department is being sued because they're saying that money wasn't essentially for everyone, right? But historically, we know these farmers, Black farmers, have encountered these challenges for decades and never got the kind of financial support they deserve.
Yeah. Mona Lisa, you want to weigh in on that?
Yes, thank you, Tammy. I think that society has rankings of the way things are done, the way programs are brought out, the way that the government functions as a whole. And I definitely think that we as the Black community do lean upon the government, the white man, whatever you want to call it, we lean on it. And the reason why we lean on it is because we're taught that that's the way out. We're also smart enough to realize that, if we could get someone at the top to hear our voice, they could also create the change that we need. If we could align ourselves with the proper people, that's power to me. That's power when you can align yourself. The National Urban League is a perfect example, of aligning themselves accordingly to be able to make the proper change. The majority of their board, believe it or not, are white people. The people who created the National Urban League are white people. And because of that, that is the reason why they were able to move and shake and make differences and make change in this, in this society. So I think the answer would be yes to that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I don't feel like we are using that as an excuse. And I do not believe that there's anything that should be changed about that, except for one minor thing. And that is, dig within yourself. Dig within yourself and find that power within yourself to know what you can do within your own zone of genius. Figure out within yourself, what can I do for me first before I reach out to others? And then once you can figure out what you do for yourself, that's when you can heal and start to move and change your own life.
That's the classic, put your oxygen mask on first and then proceed to help others. Yes. And you mentioned the National Urban League. I want to tag a note in there. Bath and Body Works had these new creations of their brand for Black History Month. Some people are a little upset about it, saying Bath and Body Works kind of, was exploiting Black History Month, but they did attribute $500,000 to the National Urban League on behalf of those Black history products that they sold in their stores, and they continue to sell for Black History Month. You bring up being successful and making sure that you handle your own business first before you start trying to circumvent the rest of the world. So in the Black community, achieving financial and academic success can equate to acting white. How do these stereotypes affect Black people to this day when we talk about playing the victim? Kevin, we'll give it to you. Oh, go ahead, Mona Lisa.
I'm
go ahead.
Sorry. I just can't stand when people say that, because do you know how often I've been accused of that throughout my life? How do you act a color? How do you do that? You can't act a specific color. Maybe you can appear to be, better off or more prosperous than someone else. But how does that equate to a white person? There is Black privilege and then there's white privilege. There is Black privilege.
Well,
And then
hold
there's
on
white
now,
privilege.
Mona Lisa. Hold on. If there's Black privilege, I need to know about it because I have not been using it. Please go into detail on
Oh
that.
no, you're using it, Tammy. It's called your show. It's called your platform. Oh, you're absolutely using your Black privilege to get out and get your voice known, because somehow, some way you landed this great show that gets out to millions of people on one of the biggest networks in the world. That's Black privilege. You know,
So
that's being able, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
That's just being able to get it out there. I just do not believe, in any way, shape, or form that, you can act a color. I feel like if you got it and you're strong enough within yourself to show somebody and that you believe in yourself, well, it's them hating on you. That's called hateration.
Okay, Mary J. Don't need no hateration, holleration in this dancery. Go ahead, Dr. Walker.
So a few things, so this what you discuss is really, we talk about racial stereotypes and misconceptions, right? This idea that Black people don't work hard, we're lazy. That's what we're really all about, stereotypes and misconceptions. Tammy, you have a show because you worked hard. And also we have to highlight, in terms of the African-American platform, that, FOXSOUL is also, we got to talk about BET and Bob Johnson, right? Because without FOXSOUL, there wouldn't be, there wouldn't, if it wasn't for BET, there would not be a FOXSOUL, right? And so we have to talk about the history of Black people, Black entrepreneurs, investing in the Black community. Like I use Bob Johnson as an example on BET. But I think we also have to talk about this idea about, Black people have this kind of switch we can turn on and we control things. That does not exist. Right. And we typically use this phrase about a victim and, about really more about being survivors. Like I said, Tammy, all your show comes from all your hard work, et cetera, throughout the years. And we need more Tammys throughout the United States. We don't have enough of them because not enough Black women have had the opportunity to have a platform to discuss a variety of issues. That's why FOXSOUL is important. And that's why we have to also recognize how BET is made what we're doing, having this conversation right now, possible.
Absolutely. Let's take a quick break on FOXSOUL and come right back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Hey, y'all, that's me. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack, and the Business of Being Black today on FOXSOUL is Black people playing the victim. Please welcome the editor of Shifter Magazine, Kevin Bourne, assistant professor at the University of Central Florida, Dr. Larry Walker, television personality and criminal justice activist, Mona Lisa Johnson. Okay, let's get into it, Kevin. You have said, Kevin, you have said that Black people calling each other queen and king, when our mindsets say we don't really see ourselves that way, is one of your frustrations.
Definitely. That's a regular conversation. I think right now within our culture, like there's just inner speech wanting to just empower ourselves and whatnot, especially after some of the derogatory names that we've called each other in the past. But for me, it's like, I hear those conversations like, hey, king, hey, queen. But at the same time, like you see that the mentality doesn't actually believe that. It's like, you can't be like, and I get it, but it's like, you can't be a king and a queen, but at the same time be in this like, woe is me type of mentality. It's like, the two don't go together, but I understand why people do it. But for me, it's like, I know some of the people that call me, king and queen, I'll look at their social media tweets and I'm like, but you don't even believe, like, do you even believe the stuff that you're saying? So it's not to say that I have a serious issue with, people calling each other king and queen, but I'm like, I feel like that's not, I don't feel like for a lot of people, that's our true identity of how we see ourselves. I think we still do see ourselves as very much lowly and less than, while trying to call ourselves these aspirational things. And for me, it doesn't go together. I think it's kind of confusing in how we're communicating with each other.
But isn't what you put in what you get out? So if you continue to refer to Black people as kings and queens, won't that eventually take hold?
It can. I mean, just like some of the other words that we call ourselves took hold. I think it's possible that some of these things, can take hold.
What other things do we call ourselves?
We call ourselves the N-word. We call, sometimes even as just men in our music, we refer to women as, different, words. So I think it just, whether it's a way that sometimes men, we refer to women, or just the way we refer to each other with the N-word, I think, and again, like those things took hold in probably more of a negative way. So I think, is it possible that we can call each other king and queen and it actually take hold? It's possible.
Okay. Dr. Walker, is it possible?
So after the transatlantic slave trade and Jim Crow, we can surely use positive affirmation to acknowledge Black men and women. For example, when I talk to my wife, I call her my Black queen, right? Because she is a queen, right? And so these positive affirmations we know are important in work. Now we can have a whole nother conversation.
I'm sorry, Dr. Walker. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I want to ask, because we do use this king and queen, we do kind of toss it around a lot. And since you call your wife a queen and you just stated because she is a queen, what does that mean? Because literally, technically, she's not a queen. I'm not a queen. Meghan Markle is a duchess. But literally, what are we saying when we say that?
We're saying I value you. And so in my case, I love you. And you mean a lot to me, and you deserve to be treated with the respect and dignity that you, as a Black queen, would deserve, right? So I think that the message behind that, when we refer to people, Black queen, kings or queens, is that I value and I see you, right, in the community. And like I said, those positive affirmations are important. I've used those positive affirmations when it comes to raising my son throughout his life, right? Because the challenges are that externally, when we turn on the news, we on social media, they're all the negative stereotypes and misconceptions that negate all the times we say, hey queen, hey king, hey prince, I see you, or hey Black woman, hey Black man, I see you. We have used that since we've arrived here and had the challenges because we know we need to counter the negative stereotypes and misconceptions of society. So we say, hey Black queen, or king, you saying, I see you.
And I see you on a level that's higher than the average.
Exactly.
Or on the level of a queen. So
what your worth is.
Mona Lisa, Oprah and them say they don't want to be called auntie. Do you want to be called queen?
I'm kind of torn with the whole queen thing, to be honest with you. I mean, part of me is like, thank you that you respect me, and thank you that you think I deserve to be honored. But then I talked to my cousin, who's an attorney. Just recently, we had this conversation, and she said, do you know, we shouldn't be calling each other queens? And I said, well, why not? And she said, well, queens are actually kept in the castle. They're kept in their areas. They're hardly ever allowed to really go out. Their lives are very protected. They can't really live a full life, and they're always having to be taken care of. They don't really have a voice. They're being told what to say, how to say it, when to do it. They're almost like a trapped individual. And that started to make me think, well, do I really want to be called a queen then at that point? And is it legitimately so that I should allow that to be said to me? And then I thought about the positive affirmation side of it as well. And I'm like, well, if we don't start speaking highly of each other and don't start lifting each other up in some way, shape, or form, the movement of positive affirmations amongst us to change the way we perceive ourselves may never occur. And if that's what it takes for this era and this time for now, well, maybe I'm going to bow down and say, you can call me queen.
Your cousin had way too much thinking time on her hands.
That's what I tell her all the time. You think too much. You think
way too much. But Queen Elizabeth seems to have, and I'm referring to the real queen, seems to have plenty of time to make decisions, and she is guarded and protected, and she is, held, but she gets out all the time whenever she wants, and she speaks on the interest of her kingdom. So if that is equivalent to being a queen, I guess I'll take it if that's the real, because I'd love to be protected. I'd love to be able to go anywhere I want, anytime I want to go. And I would also love to have a say so on what happens in the world and to speak my mind about it, and for people and for it to matter to people. Because obviously when the queen speaks, it matters. And so I do believe when I speak, I would like for that to matter to people and for them to take it with, not with a grain of salt, but with a hefty pound of substance is what I'm saying.
If that's the case, and I want to be a queen too. I want to be heard.
So take a look at what Candace Owens once said about victimhood and the overuse of the word racism. Let's take a look at this clip.
Almost a mental plague upon Black America in particular, because that word racism is being so overused that society is becoming desensitized to it, and we actually can't even recognize it when it actually exists. We think everything is racist. Things that used to be normal conflicts between human beings, getting cut off while you're driving, having a bad correspondence in a grocery store, you should just brush it off, shrug it off, and move on with your day. Now people are crying and making videos and pleading on Facebook to say, look what I experienced today.
So, what do you think about that, Kevin? Agree?
I agree and disagree. I do think that the like mental like just those mental elements of victimhood are can be a plague in the community. But I don't agree. I mean, Candace Owens, I think, is an extreme example here. But I don't agree with just her take on racism. I think racism is a reality. But my position is more so in the presence of that. How do we kind of see ourselves and conduct ourselves? But I don't think we can pretend like racism is not a factor. Or that's that these elements aren't out there. Like, they are out there. I just think that we positionally have, or mindset wise, have to kind of change the way that we approach and deal with these things.
Dr. Walker?
So, I certainly don't. Candace Owens is not a go-to for me in any of my research on racism. Let me be clear about that. First of all, second of all,
even though she's experienced it herself, but continue.
That's that we can have that conversation. That's a good point, Tammi. Right. Let's not forget that, right? So this idea of Black people being victims and kind of creating their own narrative is not consistent with history. We had this conversation a lot. We talked about Jim Crow. We talked about transatlantic slave trade. You even saw how people respond to the idea of the first Black woman being on the Supreme Court, right? That response is racialized, right? That has nothing to do with victimhood of all the Black women who qualify and have been qualified in the past and never had the opportunity. But one of the things we have to keep in mind is when it comes to Candace Owens and other people who spout nonsense is that racism based on stats and the lived experiences of Black people like me, Tammi, other people on this panel, and our ancestors. And I don't mean decades ago. I mean our parents who've experienced racism over and over again. So there's not an idea of Black people being victims. It's an idea of the country seeing us and valuing who we are as human beings.
If I can just interject again, I think, again, it's not to dispel the fact or dismiss the fact that these things aren't our experience. Like, these things are our experience. When it comes to victimhood, we're not talking about just the what's happening to us. It's the approach mentally. Like, how do we kind of interact with those things? How do we kind of see ourselves in the midst of those things, not necessarily denying that these things have happened to us and are still happening to us.
Let's take a quick break because a commercial is about to happen to us now on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on FOXSOUL. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Hi, I'm Tammi Mack, and this is FOXSOUL. So the business of being Black today is Black people playing the victim. Please welcome the editor of Shifter Magazine, Kevin Bourne, assistant professor at the University of Central Florida, Dr. Larry Walker, and television personality and criminal justice activist Mona Lisa Johnson is here. Okay, so seemed like we all agreed on Candace Owens there before the break. But I do want to play a little game of lightning round. So let's get into this lightning round. Okay, victim or victor? We've done a lot of talking about victors and we've done a lot of talking about victims. And I want to know, my panelist, if you think these people that I name are a victim or a victor. Let's start with Martin Luther King. Mona Lisa?
Victor.
Kevin?
Victor.
Dr. Walker?
Victor.
So I ask about Martin Luther King because in his day, I think, Kevin, he would have been considered a victim, don't you?
Not necessarily. I think he, just his bravery with his message in the midst of the time period he was. I think his bravery for me made him a victor. Yes, I mean in his passing or in his murder, he was would be considered a victim. But I just think the way he conducted himself and his strength in the midst of everything that was happening at that time, basically to take on the whole system in America, I would consider him a victor.
Interesting. Yeah, I understand today that's how we see him because of what has transpired because of his works. But my thought is when he was in the midst of his works, many people, including white people, including Black people, said he's just playing the victim, and Black people shouldn't be thinking about slavery in the past. And a lot of people disagreed with him. Dr. Walker, am I lying?
You're telling the truth. In fact, I remember seeing a recent Gallup poll from the 60s when Dr. King was around, and 70, 90% of people in this country disapproved of him, right? So history, it's interesting how we revisit history and reshape it, right? The other thing about Dr. King is why he's a victor is because he was responsible for the Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65, and even the Fair Housing Act of 68. And obviously we know he was killed in 68. But, and Dr. King faced a lot of challenges, death threats, from the federal government, the FBI, in terms of pressuring him. And also, like I said, but he also had the support of members of the Black community that were important, right? And also, when we talk about Dr. King in terms of being a victim, we can't forget Coretta Scott King, his wife, right? And the role of other important Black women that played in terms of the civil rights movement, because I think that a lot of times we don't mention them enough.
I just saw a video of that has hit social media in the 60s of a reporter asking several people how the death of Martin Luther King Jr. Affected them. And he stopped a white woman in her car and she said, really doesn't affect me. So let's move on. Victim or victor? Malcolm X.
Victor. And can I say why? His book, The Autobiography is Told of Malcolm X, written by Alex Haley, transformed my life.
Mona Lisa? Yeah.
I'm going to say both. And the reason why I say both is because he went through a lot, but he caused a lot of problems and he brought a lot of change. And he also stopped a lot of problems. With him, I'm going to say both.
Kevin?
I'll say Victor, because his bravery again. I think he kind of reminds me just like a bold lion. I feel like he was fearless, and I think he inspired a lot of Black people at the time, and to a certain extent still today. So I think just his influence, and his boldness and his message and his fearlessness, I would say he's a victor.
Stacey Abrams. Kevin?
Stacey Abrams. Why's that name slipping my mind?
She's in Georgia, right?
Stacey Abrams in Georgia, who has single-handedly, obviously several people have joined Stacey Abrams in the fight for voting rights. But is responsible for turning Georgia blue during that election. Dr. Walker, we'll give it to you and come back to Kevin on that one.
Yeah, so Stacey Abrams she's running for governor, but you're right, Tammy, it wasn't for her. She helped turn Georgia blue. The number of Black people and other people of color that registered to vote went up dramatically.
You say she's a victim.
I said Victor. I meant to say Victor. I'm sorry. No, she's a victor. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say
Mona Lisa?
Victor, for sure.
Okay. All right. So, Mona Lisa, let me stick with you. Tell us about your YouTube series, Prisoner of Hope, and the mission behind it.
Oh, thank you, Tammy. So Prisoner of Hope TV was kind of born out of me doing 60 Days In on A&E, where I went undercover and went into jail to just see what was right and what was wrong in the system. When I came out, I realized that there was a lot that they were not doing, to continue the voice that they claimed that they had given me and the platform that they had given me to start talking about, the injustices that occur. And so I created the show Prisoner of Hope TV to highlight the different, stories that we have where families are being impacted by incarceration. There's good, bad, and indifferent being shown there. And we're not just taking one side, we're taking all sides so that we can show, the truth of what's really happening.
Dr. Walker, what inspired you to write your piece, Why Black History Month Matters?
Because of a lot of the attacks we're seeing, the bomb threats at HBCUs and all the other challenges we're seeing in America. And even you see an article I talked about parents in Alabama suggesting that we shouldn't have Black History Month, celebrate Black History Month. So I wrote it because it's important for Americans to remember that Black history, as I said in the article, is American history.
Kevin, tell us about Shifter Magazine and the work you do there.
So yeah, we cover Black culture, music, film, fashion, just really celebrating a lot of the Black talent that's coming up, and want to just champion Black culture. So, and we also do a lot of just opinions, again, from the vantage point of Black people, trying to share perspectives, just like you're on your platform.
Thank you so much. And I have to go back to victor or victim because I'm interested in seeing what you all have to say about this person, George Floyd. Victor or victim, Mona Lisa?
Victim.
Dr. Walker?
Victim.
Kevin?
Victim.
Colin Kaepernick. I'm going to throw that one in there because we talked about him during the show. Mona Lisa.
Victim when it all came down, victor as we stand today.
Dr. Walker.
Victor.
Kevin.
I'd say both victim and victor.
Now, how you gonna say both? And you said you straight out told me he.
But there's still I did say that I did agree with like just the beginning of the kneeling aspect. Like that aspect, I definitely agreed with. I like the show, but shout out to Eva DuVernay. I like the show as well. But I do think there are certain elements within there where he did play the victim. So I'll say he's a little bit of both.
He's a little bit of both. Got it. And this one's gonna take y'all all off course, but I'm gonna throw this one in just for fun and because we got a little time left. Kanye West. Victim or victor? Y'all all looking like, oh Lord. What you got, Mona Lisa? Victor or victim?
Well, dude, like what's going on with him and the way he thinks? Like he's gone from left all the way to right. Now, I will say that because he ended up on the right side, which is now he's a Christian and he's got a church. And
so victim or victor? We got to move on. What you got? Kevin, what you got? Victim or victor?
I think he believes he's a victim, but I think just from the success he's been able to have, he's also a victor as well. He can be a billionaire.
Walker, victim or victor or victor?
I'm going confused, and I'm gonna leave.
Okay. We'll take that, and we'll thank you for being on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Thank you so much, Mona Lisa, Kevin, and Dr. Walker.